Hi students, this is a video lecture that's covering chapter 4.2 prokaryotic cells. At this point you should have watched the video that wasn't made by me. It was a video that showed a demo to try to explain why cells can't be too large. And so hopefully out of that video you realize that cells are the smallest unit of life, meaning that a single cell can have all the characteristics of living things and can be alive. But in order to get everything they need to function, to reproduce, for energy, for organizations, if they were too large, they couldn't obtain all the resources, all the things they need through their surface to provide materials for the whole cell, because the surface area wouldn't be large enough compared to the inside. So they have to be small so things can get in and out of them quickly enough to provide everything that cell needs. So just as a reminder, the cell is the smallest unit of life, and there's two categories of cells. The first are prokaryotic cell, and a prokaryotic cell, pro means before, karyon means kernel or center. So prokaryotic cells don't have a center, a nucleus. A nucleus is that portion that, if you remember from the lab, you saw in your cheek cell, that dark purple part, that's the nucleus. It contains DNA. But you saw that because you were looking at one of your own cells, which is not a prokaryotic cell. Our cells are eukaryotic cells. So eukaryotic cells evolved later in the evolution of life and contain a true nucleus. So in this video lecture, we're focusing on prokaryotic cells. So those are the simplest of all the cells. They were the first type of cell to have life on Earth. And we're just gonna kind of take an overview and some basic things that you should know about them. Sorry, I have to repeat this because I had a little glitch in my computer. But basically, prokaryotic cells are found in two of the three domains of living things. They're found in bacteria and archaea. They're not found in the domain eukarya. So bacteria are one type of prokaryotic cell. So you've probably heard bacteria before. Usually people associate bacteria with bad organisms, right? Bacteria that causes illness, bacteria that makes you sick. But there's actually many benefits to bacteria. They're decomposers, so anything on Earth that dies, leaves, animals, insects, if there weren't bacteria, those things would just sit on Earth. But bacteria break them down into their basic, first organic molecules and then atoms. Bacteria are also found in our digestive system, in our skin, and they actually help us in many ways. The bacteria in our digestive system help us break down food. They provide us vitamins as they break down the food that then we absorb into our bodies. It's now known that the types of bacteria in your digestive system can influence your immune system, and people that don't have a high enough diversity or amount of bacteria have a lower immune system. So there's many benefits to bacteria. And here's a picture of just a classic rod-shaped bacteria, E. coli, that you may have heard of. And then the other type of prokaryotic cells are these archaea. And these archaea are also prokaryotic cells, but they're not found in our intestine or our skin. They're found in these extreme environments. So they're found in like hot thermal vents. They're found in really salty, the saltiest lakes on Earth. They're found in, I meant hydrothermal vents. They're found in the deepest parts of the ocean where no light and no other things can live. So sometimes these are referred to as extremophiles. And here's a picture of an environment in which they could live. A little bit about the structure of prokaryotes, and here this picture shows different types of bacteria. So there's 3 basic structures. These can be further broken down, but for this class, I'm just going to briefly talk about this. So remember, these bacteria are really small, right? They're simpler, and they can be found in different shapes. And they're single-celled organisms, right? Like we have billions of cells that make us up. A bacteria is alive, and it's just an organism, but it's just one cell. And so these pictures show the 3 shapes. So the spherical or sphere round shape is a coccus. All right. Some ones you may have heard of are like streptococcus. The bacteria that causes strep throat is this type of bacteria. Or staphylococcus, staph infections that some people get on their skin is caused by this bacteria. On the right here, you have a rod shape or a bacillus shape. And that I already mentioned, E. coli, right? E. coli is found in animal feces. So sometimes when there's big storms and the sewer system in Milwaukee overflows, it has to be released into Lake Michigan. And then they'll have like an E. coli warning where you can't go swimming because the sewage has so much feces and there's E. coli in there, and then it gets into the lake water and you can get sick from it. And then this bottom one is this spiral or corkscrew shape that's spirillum. An example of this bacteria are some STDs are caused by this bacteria, like syphilis is caused by this bacteria. A little bit more about their shape. Just like eukaryotic cells, they have a cell membrane. A cell membrane is like the outer border of the cell. It's like the gatekeeper, what controls what enters and exits the cell. In addition to a cell membrane that sometimes we call a lipid bilayer because there's 2 layers of these lipid molecules called phospholipids, there is a cell wall that's around the membrane. And if you think about it, these organisms are only one cell. If they didn't have a cell wall and they just had a membrane, they would get mushed and break apart really easily. So the cell wall around them helps them protect themselves, right? So they do have a cell wall that maintains its shape, and it's strengthened by this material called peptidoglycan that we're not going to really get into in this class. Now I'm going to get a little bit more about the structure. So this picture has a lot going on in it. I just want to point out a few things. They have it shown like it's cut open and they show all the layers. So it's really the outside of the bacteria that's most complex. The inside doesn't have that much. So we talked about it having a cell membrane, and here the cell membrane is this light blue material here represents the plasma membrane or the cell membrane. After that, it's the cell wall in red, right? That's protection. And around the cell wall, some of the bacteria have what's called a capsule, which is like a jelly carbohydrate, sugary, that helps them stick to things. The inside of the bacteria, if you look here in the inside, the fluid inside is called cytoplasm, just like our cells have cytoplasms. If you recall, prokaryotic cells don't have a nucleus, so they don't have like one center structure that contains their DNA. Their DNA, and the DNA here is like this part that looks like kind of spaghetti all coiled. That's the DNA. That's the genetic material. And that's just kind of centralized, but not inside of nucleus. It's referred to as the nucleoid region, but it's not a true nucleus. They also contain what are called ribosomes. Maybe you've heard of those. We have ribosomes as well. We'll talk more about them in eukaryotic cells. Ribosomes are where proteins are made. Bacteria, again, because they're just one cell, they need a way to move around. So many of them move around by this structure here, the flagella, right? The flagella, where they can move around that way, especially if they live in water environments like E. coli does. They don't all have the flagella, and there are other ways that they can move. All right, so that was a little bit just about prokaryotic cells in general. just as a recap, there's two categories of cell types, prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Prokaryotic cells are the most ancient. They're the simplest, right? They're small, much smaller than a eukaryotic cell. They've been around much longer than we have, and they will be around much after us. They are found in two domains of living things. They're found in bacteria. They're what bacteria are made of, and they're also what archaea is made out of, right? So bacteria is the one we talk most about, but archaea are prokaryotic cells that are found in like extreme environments. Okay, the next video will be about chapter 4.3, and that will be covering eukaryotic cells.